Hello everybody and welcome to another video, and today it is the 27th of September and we have a lot of news that I missed because I was gone for the past 4 days, but I will go over all of that and we'll start with the Kherson region and work our way up to the Lyman situation. But I will first start out again with Kherson, where I don't really have much to say about this sector, but there were two things that I did change on the map that occurred over the past few days. So, first of all, Russia, their Air Force, launched some heavy strikes on the Ukrainian positions in Suki Stavak, which caused them to retreat from a lot of their positions around Stepove, Chokolove, Vishneve, which I talked about in the previous video. But now they've also abandoned their positions around Bezhimine and Shlavshlive and also Kostromka. So they're really just consolidating their ground around Andrivka and Lozove. They're even starting to leave Suki Stavak at the moment because there is really not much cover over here because of how much it's been targeted by the Russian Air Force. So there is the possibility that either the Ukrainians withdraw from this bridgehead or they stay at the two towns over here, Andrivka and Lozove, and wait for the replenishment of forces, because there have been some new companies that were formed in this city over here, which will be sent to the front line. But they've also withdrawn from some other areas, such as the area around Bilohirka. They had some forward positions that were pretty close to Davidiv Breed around here, but now the new line is very close to Bilohirka itself. You only have a few artillery gunners left in this area who are defending. So clearly, the Ukrainians are in a precarious situation in this area. But let's move on to the northern Kherson area, where I did make some changes. I did mark Petrivka and Lyubimivka as under full Russian control, and also Miro Lyubivka. So all three of these are back under full Russian control. The Ukrainians have withdrawn to this road over here, which was the previous line of fighting, but they do still hold this polygon. These two polygons over here is basically what they gained from the weeks of fighting in the northern Kherson region. But that's really it in terms of Kherson. Again, this is not the main focus anymore. We did see, though, that Russia in the Odessa area have started to utilize the Shahed 136 drones, and the Russian prototype is a Drone 2. So this video is from a few days ago, so I'm not necessarily talking about this video, but there were some other instances of the Shahed drones being utilized on Odessa. One example was when it hit this red house over here. I'm pretty sure there was some red house that was targeted. It might have been a base for the AFU. Some sources were saying that the headquarters for Command South was targeted, but I'm pretty sure that's in Mykolaiv, so maybe it's some other base relating to Ukrainian command centers. But either way, there was a very huge fire on the night of the 25th of September in Odessa, and that was due to the 5 Shahed drones being sent over. They come in groups of 5, and they have a pre-planned target. And so, at least in the night of the 25th, there were 3 drones that were recorded, and 2 of them hit their targets, and the other one was shot down. So I don't know about the other 2, what happened to them. Maybe they hit some other target that was unrelated. But it seems as if they hit 2 fuel trucks and an ammo depot, and then of course one of them was shot down. So you are seeing now that the Shaheeds are being utilized more and more by the Russians, and they're actually going for some pretty long-range targets. I was saying that it would make more sense for them to be used on the front lines, but it seems as if Russia is stationing them probably in this area of the Kherson region, and then they're just sending them to Odessa like this. That is not too far away, but I would expect it to be used on like military targets that were closer to the front line. So at least 37 miles away, 38 miles away from Russian controlled territory. But anyway, let's move on now. I don't have anything to say about the Zaporizhia region, and not much about the Donetsk city area. Just that there was a failed assault by the Ukrainians, specifically the 79th Air Assault Brigade on Marinka. So that was pushed back. The status quo has not really changed in this area in a while. But I will be moving on now to the Bakhmut front, which is an important front which is being ignored at the moment because there are so much more important events going on further north. But over the past few days, you have seen the Russians enter Odradivka. At first, they took over some of the positions just south of it in this area around the road that is adjacent to Mykolaiivka. But now they've actually reached the southern part of the town. So now you're having fighting on these few residential streets. It's not a large town, so it could be overrun pretty quickly. But a larger town that is being fought over now is Zaitsev, where the main thrust is coming from the south, where you had Kadema taken over in all the hills. So now from there, they're pushing along this road over here. And there's some pretty heavy clashes going on in the southern part of Zaitsev. Meanwhile, you're also seeing a push from Vershina, which could put Zaitsev in an encirclement. So you might see a withdrawal from here because it's already being attacked from two sides, and it could also be attacked from the third side if Vesela Dolina is taken. And Vesela Dolina is being attacked at the moment, specifically from the new captured positions from the Donbasskaya electrical substation. So you have the Wagner troops fighting in this area as well. They're trying to push first to Vesela Dolina and then to Ivanhrad. That was their stated goal. And you're also seeing a new push, but I don't have specific details about what land was gained. But there was some sort of push in the direction of Peterodny in recent days, as well as renewed clashes in the Bakhmut area, where I still don't exactly know what's going on in this eastern part of Bakhmut because Ukraine seems to have started withdrawing from this area, but you don't actually have the Wagner troops asserting their presence over a lot of these residential areas just yet. So we're gonna have to wait and see what happens over there. But there's a bit of ambiguity as to the situation over there. But let's move on now to the Siversk area where we have some new geolocations of a Russian assault on Bilohorivka. I forgot to add the video, but just know that the geolocation for the assault was over here. You basically had the Russian troops attacking the road over here, and there's also a train, some train tracks, which were fought over. So clearly you have some sort of flanking maneuver on Bilohorivka. This entire area just to the east of Bilohorivka was taken over by Russia. So now they're using this position to attack Bilohorivka itself, and also from the north by taking over the road area. But Bilohorivka, it's sort of forested, so you're seeing some clashes over there in the forested areas. And in terms of the settlement itself, it is pretty small. You have one river that's flowing through, but it is very narrow. Again, Russia has been trying to assault this area for a while, but it seems as if they have renewed their assaults in recent days. They've also renewed their assaults on Spirny using the new Wagner reinforcements that were sent to this area. We have a geolocation over here of fighting near Spirny, right next to the line that I drew. So it's very close to this. Sort of looks like some electrical facility. So you're seeing some fighting over here, and that's just on the eastern outskirts of Spirny itself. So you are seeing some positional battles over here, but no side is really making any headways just yet. But let's move on now to some of the more pressing areas of the front line, specifically the Lyman and Oskil fronts, where I will be going into detail about what occurred here. So tune in for that. So we've seen some Ukrainian breakthroughs in the area around Lyman, but not south of Lyman necessarily, because of the forested areas, first of all, but also the fact that it's very heavily fortified at the moment. You have the Bars 16 volunteer unit operating in this area, and they've prevented any sort of breakthroughs by the 66th Mechanized Brigade, which was actually struck today. Not today. It was struck recently by the Russian Air Force in Shuchurove over here, which limited their offensive capabilities for a while. And that's why you're not really seeing any head-on assaults into Lyman. It is a pretty large city, so it wouldn't be the best idea. Instead, the Ukrainians opted to launch flanking maneuvers, which would force Russia to withdraw because they'd be in an operational encirclement. So on the 25th, 26th, the Ukrainians were able to break through the Russian lines, and this is a rough estimate of the lines at the time. It sort of looked like this. You had fighting around Novoselivka, Chandri Holove, Srednije. So they were able to break in from the northern plains over here. They pushed through these plains and reached the area of Ritkodub. So you had some pretty heavy fighting over there. Eventually, the Ukrainians were able to assert themselves in Karpivka, Ritkodub, and even in some of these other towns like Hlushchenkove and Novi Mir and Malivka. So apparently there was some sort of Russian counterattack from the Bars 13 volunteer unit, and they were able to take back a lot of the lost positions that they had lost on the 25th. So that occurred around the same day, just later on in the day, and they were able to take back all of the towns besides Ritkodub, if I'm not mistaken. So then the front line looks more like this, where you have this bulge in the line, which could be tapped into if Russia actually had reserves, which they do to a certain extent, but it was not enough for numerical superiority. So the Ukrainians actually did have the advantage in terms of manpower in this area, and they still do at the moment, which is why Russia was not able to successfully counterattack in any meaningful way. They were able to, for a few hours, to hold their recaptured positions, but eventually by the 27th, they had lost all of the land that they had recaptured. So Ukraine retook Hlushchenkove, Novimir, and reached as far as Novomikhailivka and Katerinivka, where they had originally asserted their presence but were pushed back by the Bars 16 unit. But then the Bar 16 unit confirmed that they had lost control of this town and of Nove. And very recently, they also lost control of Zelena Dolina, where we have actually footage of Ukrainian troops in Zelena Dolina. There's a geolocation as well. And then for Ritkodub, we have a video of Ukraine entering the town over here, which you could watch. So clearly, the Russian defenses in this area, just north of Lyman, were not well prepared. They tried to hold a line which was spanning from Drobisheve to Karpivka, but clearly the Bar 16 unit was not well in terms of manpower. They did not have sufficient amount of men to hold the line, and the defenses that they had made were very haphazard because of the recent fall of all of the Russian controlled areas in Kharkiv. They really didn't have that much time to set up defenses before Ukraine reached their positions. So now they're just able to roam through with their mechanized brigades into all these areas without that much resistance. And that could change once Russia sends in the reservists, but those people are being mobilized at the moment. It's going to take a while. And in the meantime, Ukraine does have the initiative, and they will continue, I think, at least in the direction of Makivka. This town over here, they're not too far away from it. They just need to cross over some empty land, and they can actually reach Makivka, which would cut off a lot of the supply lines to, say, Neveske and some of these other towns around these lakes, which could be used as a new defensive line if Lyman would fall. So actually, reaching Makivka would basically null any sort of opportunity at setting up a relatively good defensive line just close to Lyman, not even losing Yampil. So even now, that's being called into question. In terms of some other towns that are being contested, I have these 3 towns that's contested at the moment. It's sort of a gray zone, and I will fix the map over the weekend and make it look nice again. But for now, this will suffice. These 3 towns are currently ambiguous. I have no idea who's in control. Kolodiazi. If this town actually fell, then that would be a big deal for the Russians because they really don't have that many supply lines left in terms of supplying Lyman. There's one over here that would reach Kremina, and there's another that would go from like Dorbicheve, but this one is contested at the moment because of the heavy fighting in Dorbicheve. So then, really, their only option would be from Kremina or some other like minor road that you can find over here, which could connect to say Zarichny. So instead of going to Kremina, the road would like fork off here and go to Zarichny and connect to some of the other roads over here, like Terny, Ivanivka. But even now, these towns over here, like Ivanivka, Bilohorivka, and Terny, they're all under Ukrainian fire control. You have a lot of heavy artillery fire by the Ukrainians in this area. So, in terms of supplies, it would be very difficult. And even in Crimea right now, that town specifically is being threatened because you had pontoon crossings that were set up recently by the Ukrainian recon units, and they crossed over into the forested area over here. Now they're harassing the Brova and Crimea, which also puts into question another defensive line that could have been set up because Crimea is on this key road which connects to Svatove. And if this entire line were to fall due to the Ukrainian breakthrough, this would be the next line of defense. So if you have units harassing Crimea itself, which is again a key supply hub, it's very close to Rubizhny and Severodonetsk, and then by extension Lysychansk. So let's say Crimea is to fall, this would put into question the entire defensive line around Svatove. You could see a Ukrainian mechanized assault that would just like roam through these roads over here and reach Svatove pretty quickly. Right now, Ukraine is only about 17 miles away from Svatove if you were to measure where their positions around Novomikhailivka. So Russia really needs to find a way to stabilize the situation before they lose one of the largest cities in the LPR. This is one of those key towns in LPR that was taken earlier on in the war. And not only would it be bad in terms of like the supply lines for the rest of the LPR front, but it would be bad in terms of morale for all the people that were fighting for so long. Because think of it, Crimea, there was heavy fighting there for like a week or two to take over the city. And now it seems as if it could be taken over by some recon unit without any fight. Or same thing with Lyman, where it's basically an operational encirclement already. You have heavy shelling of the town from Prishiba and some other towns over here, some like Slavyansk or Mykolaiivka, all shelling Lyman, and any sort of supplies are now very difficult. The 20th Guards Army is being thrown in around Chandri Holove, Novoselivka, Drobicheve to hold the line over here at these 4 key towns. And in the end, they might be able to hold out, sort of like those National Guard units that held out in Balaklia for a few days. But look at the big picture. They're being surrounded in 3 key areas. So it seems as if they're able to hold the line, then they could be encircled. So it's a big deal. They would have to withdraw before it's too late. And that could happen very soon, actually, given the current Ukrainian advance and the pace of it. Even further north, you're seeing a Ukrainian advance. As I said before, you have the geolocation at Pisky Radkivsky. They're present around a school area. So now they're even going to push towards this other town that was fought over, Pidliman, up to Borova, another one of those larger towns that was taken over by Russia. And that will just make the entire line over here around Oskil collapse as well. Speaking of which, in the area around Kupiansk, we actually have some new news about Ukrainian advances. They have taken over this town over here, Kucherivka, and they're pushing towards Petropavlivka. It's possible that they've even taken it by now. But seriously, all the Russian resistance around here has been quelled. Even further south at Kupiansk, Vuzhlovy, it's now been announced that the Ukrainians have taken over this town. So I will have to change this to blue. So this was a key rail hub. You have a key rail junction over here that I previously had mentioned, and now that's all under Ukrainian control. All this road over here is probably going to be taken by Ukraine in the coming days. They can push in two directions, from the north and from the south, and basically kick out whatever remaining Russian troops are situated along the Oskil River now. Even further north from Kupiansk, you're seeing some Ukrainians fighting, although I'm not sure how much headway they've made recently. You have the 92nd and 14th Brigades fighting in this area, specifically around Tavilzhanka. Since I made my previous video, there really hasn't been much of an update. So it seems as if the fighting is really not subsided, but the changes have not been present. We haven't seen much of a change since the past few days. But nonetheless, Ukraine has been able to make some important gains in other sectors of the fighting, which really does put all of Russia's supply lines in jeopardy at the moment. We're going to have to wait and see what happens in terms of Russian mobilization, because now a lot of those troops are going to be sent in to sort of solidify the supply lines and the logistics, and that will really take a burden off of a lot of the current professional troops that are in Russia and in Ukraine that are operating and have not been able to effectively fight on the front lines, because they're having to deal with all these logistical issues, and they're having to guard the territories that they had conquered. So again, it's going to free up a lot of resources for Russia, for the professional army, as the reinforcements are sent in. And we also have a lot of news about the referendums, and maybe that will lead to some sort of either volunteers signing up in the new 4 regions that will be integrated into Russia, or some sort of mobilization in this area. So in terms of the referendum, you had 98.42% of the people voting in favor of joining Russia, and that's in the LPR. And DPR, it was 99.83%. In Zaporizhia, it was 93.11%. And then in Kherson, it was 87.05%, according to the Russian numbers. And then, according to the Russian numbers, the turnout in LPR was 83.61%, and in DPR, it was 86.89%. And then in Zaporizhia, it was 96.43%, and in Kherson, it was 63.58%. So you get a good idea of the trends over here. First of all, the biggest support was in LPR DPR, which does make sense. And then the lowest support was in Kherson. But again, the numbers are still high nonetheless. This could be in part due to the fact that, one, if you would like to believe that Russia is rigging it, then that would be the most sensible explanation. But there could be some other explanations as well if you were to disregard that fact. First of all, a lot of the pro-Ukrainian people probably did not participate in the vote, either because they are just conscientious objectors, or because they're not even in the territory controlled by Russia. They're either living in territory that is still under Ukrainian control within those regions, or they're just refugees in some other part of the region. So those turnout numbers are sort of misleading, because it doesn't include all of the people that, as I mentioned, either live under Ukrainian control or just left in general. But out of the total residents that remain, those are the turnout numbers. Also, there is a lot of angst that voting in favor of Russia would lead to some sort of retribution if the Ukrainians took back that land, which is why you might have seen a lower turnout in some areas. But all in all, this was pretty much expected. We all knew this would happen, and now we're going to have to wait and see for the ramifications. So that's all for now. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you later.